50,000 years in the making. Our nation has been built on heroes and heart. Explorers, builders, and the brave. Tonight, the Great War. A young nation is dragged into its first global conflict. From the Middle East to the vast fronts of Europe. Australian farmers, lawyers, housewives, every one a volunteer.
Fire!
They'll fight with courage and commitment. And from it, the Anzac spirit will be born. This is Australia, the story of us. Anzac Day, 1915, 4:30 a.m. An Australian submarine enters the most dangerous shipping channel on Earth. The crew's orders: penetrate the sea lanes behind Gallipoli and sink Turkish ships. Their success or failure will help determine the fate of the Gallipoli campaign and 20,000 Australian volunteers.
The reason so many people volunteered for that war was because they saw that need to serve and protect our way of life.
Lieutenant Commander Henry Stoker, captain of the AE2, prepared to take her where very few dare.
The captain of AE2 was a maverick. 3 other British submarine commanders refused. They did not like the idea of going through the Dardanelles. In fact, they said it couldn't be done.
From August 1914, Germany and Britain are at war. Turkey sides with Germany. Australia backs Britain with all the money and men it can muster.
There was really, tragically, a notion that a nation was not a nation until it had spilt blood, until your young men have proven themselves in battle.
Australia's first great battle of World War I begins here. The Dardanelles. The narrow waterway the Allies must control to defeat Turkey. The Gallipoli Peninsula guards its entrance. To the northeast, crucial supply lines from Turkey's capital. All heavily defended.
Arsenal ahead!
Stoker and his crew enter the home waters of the Turkish Navy. Massive guns defend its shores.
Enemy fire! 300 degrees. Emergency dive 10 down, maintain at 70. Diving, sir! Load forward ballast! Loading forward ballast! At 30. Depth, Suckling. God damn it, man. At 50, sir. Get us to 70, Suckling.
Petty Officer Charles Suckling. This is his first submarine posting.
65, sir. 65, Suckling.
Like his mates, he gets extra danger money.
40 degrees northeast, sir.
Blood money, they call it. He's about to earn it. In 1915, submarine warfare is new and dangerous. Reliable sonar is yet to be invented. Radios are erratic. The Turks' formidable defences include a deadly curtain of underwater mines that no Allied ship or submarine has ever survived.
Minefield! Steady as she goes. Maintaining at 70.
Maintaining 70, sir.
The AE2 sails blind into the Turkish minefield.
It's creepy, it's eerie, and they can't see a thing because they can't put their periscope up, they can't surface because they'll be caught.
Steady.
lives of Suckling and his mates hang by a thread.
The next hour provided an experience never to be forgotten. The rappings and scrapings on the hull of the boat by the mooring wires of the mines seemed never-ending.
After an hour,
Clear.
they pass the minefield.
To be inside AE2 is terrifying. This is a steel can, which if it's punctured underwater will drown you, and if it surfaces, it's likely to kill you from gunfire. So AE2 is a very dangerous vessel to be in.
All right. Bearing.
The Australians are now deep in enemy territory.
2623.
The waters are thick with Turkish warships.
25, sir.
They are both targets and threats to the AE2. The submarine's periscope gives away her position.
Enemy fire, shore position, 600 yards.
The Turks attack just as the Australians prepare to strike.
Prepare bow torpedo. Torpedo ready, sir. 300 yards. Fire!
A steel tube travelling at 20 kilometres per hour, packed with over 150 kilograms of explosives. Enough to blow a hole the size of a house in a ship's hull. The AE2 strikes a deadly blow.
Emergency dive. Diving, sir.
But desperate for revenge, a Turkish destroyer tries to ram the sub.
We're at 30. Readings. At 50, sir. We've made it. Well done. Well done, young man.
While Stoker and his men celebrate, the first wave of 20,000 Australians attacks the Turks at Anzac Cove. They show great courage, but barely make it beyond the beach.
Gallipoli was essentially a disaster in relation to being landed on the wrong beach and completely underestimating the Turkish defences.
But for 5 days, the AE2 harasses Turkish ships resupplying their men at Gallipoli. It's one of the great naval achievements of the war.
AE2 was the only unit on the 25th of April that achieved its objectives. The Army failed, the rest of the Navy failed, but AE2 broke into the Dardanelles and cut the Turkish sea lanes of communication. It is the only good news on the 25th of April, 1915.
The AE2 fights until she's too badly damaged to continue. Her crew abandon ship and sink her. Stoker and his men spend the next 3.5 years as prisoners of war. The Australian submarine still lies at the bottom of the Sea of Marmara. In some ways, the AE2 is too successful. Her breakthrough encourages the British commanders at Gallipoli to stick to their flawed invasion plans. Coming up, he's a 5'5" roo shooter from Queensland with a mission.
Billy sings like a modern rock star. Everyone in Anzac knows him.
In one of the deadliest duels of Gallipoli, who will survive when Australia's most lethal sniper faces off against Turkey's top marksman? September 1915. The Anzacs have been bogged down in the trenches of Gallipoli for 4 months. Over 6,000 dead. More than twice that wounded, for gains in territory of a few hundred metres at best. Yet from this bloody stalemate, they will forge a new sense of Australia.
As the first guys hit the shore, and this is not made up, and this is not mythologising, they actually shouted as they were charging up the hill, "Come on, Australia!"
Sniper Billy Singh, Queensland grue shooter, just 5'5", about to engage in a deadly duel for his country and to protect his mates.
Billy Singh is like a modern rock star. Everyone in Anzac knows him, including, in fact, several generals and even an admiral go up to the front line to watch him shoot.
Officially, Billy has killed 150 Turks. Unofficially, 300. The diggers keep their own tally, like a cricket score. The Turks also have a crack shot assassin. The Aussies only know him as Abdul the Terrible. He's killed 70 Anzacs. Billy's determined to stop him shooting anymore. Billy Singh isn't even meant to be at Gallipoli. His dad is Chinese. Officially, Australia bans volunteers of non-European descent. But recruiters turn a blind eye. Billy Singh is too good to keep out.
Billy Singh's not alone in being a non-white Australian soldier. I mean, there are about 1,000 Aborigines who also joined the AIF, who are also not supposed to be in uniform and are also fighting for a white Australia. The test that's applied to these men is not, when they're in uniform, what colour are you? The test is, are you a good soldier?
In adversity, we all come together. And that's what Billy Singh did. In adversity, he goes, I know there's racism. I know I'm treated like a second-class citizen. But for the better good, for the greater good, I'm going to ignore that and fight for Australia.
Billy works stretches of trench nearest the hunting grounds of Turkish crackshot Abdul. He knows that if he keeps hitting his targets, Abdul will eventually come looking for him. Abdul analyses Billy's victims, checking entry and exit wounds. He triangulates back, looking for clues to Billy's hiding place. Abdul will stalk Billy for weeks. Billy Singh isn't the only Anzac looking after his mates. Lance Corporal William Beach, a 36-year-old builder from Sydney, invents the periscope gun. Made from Army-issue shaving mirrors and old crates, it allows the Anzacs to shoot at the Turks with no risk of being shot themselves.
There's a really rich sense and a rich history of invention in Australia. It's that ability to make do with what you have and to be able to engineer the situation to your advantage.
Beach's ingenuity saves countless lives. But the periscope gun is nowhere near as deadly as a skilled sniper. Billy hunts the trenches where Abdul hides. Today, he'll get his best chance for a shot.
Got potential movement.
The sniper feels when he tumbles an enemy out of a tree or picks him off from behind a rock that he is saving the lives of his own companions. If allowed to live, that soldier will kill or injure an unlimited number of lads.
While the Australian closes in on Abdul's hiding place, so does the Turk pinpoint Billy's position. Two hitmen, each with the other in his sights. Both desperate to be the first to see a clean shot. Billy wins a rare personal battle in this industrial-scale war. He's awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal for his skill and courage. He puts his life on the line every day for his country and his mates. The kind of loyalty in adversity that becomes synonymous with Gallipoli.
Well, the Anzac spirit, to me, is something that's been carried on since Gallipoli, and something that we need to protect, because what it is are the values that I believe we now have founded our culture on.
Despite the cost of thousands of lives, the Anzacs make little new ground. British military censorship means few Australians, including Prime Minister Andrew Fisher, are aware of the bloodbath. Coming up,
they censored the entire document.
A whistleblower determined to beat media censorship and for Australia to know the truth.
Do you know how Andrew Fisher got to learn of the landing? He read it in the newspaper like every other Australian.
His 25-page letter will change the course of the war and save thousands of lives. His name is Keith Murdoch. September 1915, Marseille, France. 5 months since the disastrous Gallipoli landing, the SS Multan stops on her way to London. Carrying a letter that could save thousands of lives is Australian journalist Keith Murdoch. Ambitious. Determined. One day he'll found what will become one of the world's largest media empires. Now, he must smuggle the secret letter past British intelligence. Murdoch has witnessed firsthand the dire situation at Gallipoli. Nearly 7,000 Australians dead, and the living pinned down. Still in sight of the beach they first landed on.
Perhaps the landings were not the greatest blunder. The greatest blunder was not withdrawing the troops as soon as it was obvious that the objective could not be achieved. The politicians and generals didn't want to admit they'd made a mistake.
At home, Australians are unaware of the mistakes and the war's full horror. They get only heavily censored letters and news reports from the front. Even Prime Minister Andrew Fisher is kept in the dark.
Do you know how Andrew Fisher got to learn of the landing? He read it in the newspaper like every other Australian citizen. That's the level of knowledge that the British allowed him to have. And he was the Prime Minister tasked with the responsibility of placing his troops in war.
At Gallipoli, Murdoch gets the digger's perspective and quickly realises what Australians are up against.
I have given only a bare impression of life at Anzac. Life that is spiritual, mental and physical pain. No one at home can imagine what it is. It is worse than any picture conjured by inexperienced, peaceable Australians.
Mr. Murdoch, please take a seat.
Murdoch meets British journalist Ellis Ashmead Bartlett. He's been at Gallipoli since the landing, trying to tell the truth about the campaign. But military censors delete the grim facts.
They've censored the entire document.
Everything. I need you to do something for me.
Together, the two journalists hatch a plan to blow the whistle on the Gallipoli disaster. A letter to the British Prime Minister that could save thousands of lives and put both of them in jail.
Whistleblowers wrestle with some really difficult ethics because for the most part, they need to break contracts, break agreements, even break the law. And they wouldn't do that if it didn't mean a lot to them on an ethical level.
In Marseille, British intelligence officers hunt for Murdoch. They're acting on a tip-off. Rumours swirl that Murdoch has been betrayed by a fellow journalist. The letter he carries contains the truth about Gallipoli. It's dynamite, but only if Murdoch can deliver it.
Mr. Murdoch! What seems to be the problem? Mr. Murdoch, I have orders to ask if you're carrying any letters. Yes, I have one. It is for the Prime Minister of England. On the authority of His Majesty's government, I order you give it to me. Will it reach the Prime Minister? I presume it will, yes.
The letter vanishes into Britain's military bureaucracy. It's never seen again.
Thank you for your cooperation.
But Keith Murdoch is not finished yet. Remarkably, Murdoch has committed the entire letter to memory. He rewrites it. This time, he addresses it to the Australian Prime Minister, Andrew Fisher. It will become known as the Gallipoli Letter.
It is undoubtedly one of the most terrible chapters in our history. 2 of our finest light horse regiments were wiped out in 10 minutes. We lost 500 men, squatters' sons and farmers' sons, on that terrible spot. What I want to say to you now, very seriously, is that the continuous and ghastly bungling over the Dardanelles enterprise was to be expected from such a general staff as the British Army possesses.
This letter gets through. The fallout is swift and far-reaching. The British commander at Gallipoli is sacked, and evacuation plans begin. On December 20, 1915, 8 months after the landing, the Anzacs withdraw. The Australian-run evacuation is the best planned part of the entire campaign. 20,000 men leave Turkey over 2 nights, and not one soldier is lost. They owe their lives, in part, to Keith Murdoch.
What Keith Murdoch did was puncture that bubble of hypocrisy, I suppose, and demonstrated that very often governments use rules about censorship not so much as to preserve national security, but to prevent blunders and inconsistencies being exposed.
After the war, Murdoch buys stakes in newspapers across Australia, the seeds of a worldwide media dynasty. Australia is shocked and devastated by the truth Murdoch reveals, but we stay committed to the war. The survivors of Gallipoli and fresh volunteers now head to France and the Western Front. But it's not just men who will prove themselves in the worst killing fields in history. Coming up, she's awarded the equivalent of the Victoria Cross for nurses.
For too long, we've associated heroism just with male courage.
How an extraordinary idea in battlefield medicine results in an act of great bravery by nurse Alicia Kelly. August 21, 1917, Brandhoek, Belgium. German shellfire creeps closer to an Australian casualty clearing station, a frontline hospital.
Squeeze my hand, that's the way.
Alicia Kelly, a war nurse since Gallipoli. She routinely saves severely wounded men. But today, Alicia must choose between her own safety and the lives of her patients.
He's bleeding, he's in and out of consciousness and no anaesthetic.
I think the Australian character is at its best when it's tested. It's that ability to put aside ourselves and do what needs to be done for the good of our fellow man.
The First World War is dominated by machine guns and heavy artillery. They create injuries on a scale never seen before. And by far the bloodiest fighting is on the Western Front. The front is a vast series of trenches, 700 kilometres long, stretching from the Swiss border to the Belgian coast. Here, 2 out of 3 Anzacs are killed or wounded, the highest casualty rate suffered by any country in the British Empire. Wounded men are treated far behind the front line. The journeys are long and dangerous, and many die before reaching help. But a new idea will save thousands. Casualty clearing stations close to the battlefront.
The casualty clearing stations were moved within 6 to 10 kilometres of the front line, which meant that the seriously wounded men were able to get the major surgery that they needed as soon as possible.
Squeeze my hand.
We know from studying the medical literature today how important it is to get to trauma quickly. So it was very innovative that they had this mentality back then in the First World War.
But how close to the front line is too close? The Germans are only 7 kilometres away. Their guns can lob shells over twice that distance.
It's gonna be fine.
And the shelling is getting closer. Working alongside Alicia is Padre Evelyn Muncham.
The noise of the guns has been startling and deafening. One bomb fell close to the sisters' quarters, killing an officer and an orderly.
Over 2,000 nurses like Alicia serve in the Australian Army Nursing Service. In Cairo, London, Lemnos, on hospital ships in the Mediterranean, as well as caring for the wounded from the battlefields of France and Belgium.
For too long, we've associated heroism just with male military battle courage. The nurses were just as heroic.
Nurses must be between 21 and 40 and single to enlist. Many of those who marry keep it secret so they can keep working. Australian nurses are not supposed to be deployed on the front line.
The peak of a nurse's ambition when she was at the Western Front was to actually get to a casualty clearing station. They wanted to get as close as possible to their boys to make the greatest difference that they could.
The German bombardment intensifies. Many of Alicia's patients are too badly hurt to be moved.
Medical staff, please, to the shelter now, please. Medical staff, please.
She gets the order she's been dreading.
Sister? Sister Kelly, please, come now.
I know, I will. I'll follow you.
No, you must come now,
I know,
please.
I will, I promise.
Sister Kelly, please, I
I'll be
beg
there,
you,
I'll be
come
there.
now. Please. Come on, you must come.
She must leave her patients in their beds, immobile, vulnerable, terrified.
Nurse Kelly, keep going.
I'm going back in.
You can't.
Alicia's loyalty to her patients outweighs her instinct for survival.
James, what are you doing? You need to get back into bed. Come on, please, do that for me. That's it, that's the best way. Stay calm, okay?
She spreads calm, comfort,
Fine, gentlemen, we're gonna be fine.
and some inventive armour.
I want you to put this on your head, okay? It might just protect you. James, I want you to do this for me.
Clearly she understands what's going on. She'd be very well aware that at any moment one of those artillery shells could land. But she does it because, again, she's displaying that Anzac spirit because she knows that that's her job.
I know the basins are useless for protection, especially with a direct hit.
That's all we have to do.
But they are especially good for morale.
The women were told not to talk to men, which, being Aussie girls, they did all the time. I mean, they developed a personal relationship with patients.
Alicia's colleagues take refuge from the attack in the bomb shelter.
Where's Sister Kelly?
She went back.
The Germans continue to lob 40-kilogram shells at the clearing station.
Padre?
Risking his own life, the Padre goes back for Nurse Kelly.
She didn't even realise how brave she had been. She was merely concerned that she would get into trouble because she disobeyed the original order to leave the men and go to the dugout.
For her conspicuous gallantry under fire, Nurse Alicia Mary Kelly receives the Military Medal, the equivalent of the Victoria Cross for nurses.
Australians have that incredible ability to rise out of the darkness into the light with humour and grace. They don't wallow in self-pity. They really do go, she'll be right. And with a mate by your side, you can get through anything.
For 4 long years, Australians continue to fight and die bravely in World War I. But the cost in lives, money and grief comes close to breaking our young country. Australia and its allies are desperate to end the horror of the trenches. Coming up, bold, daring, heavily outnumbered. How Melbourne solicitor Pompey Elliott's radical plan rewrites the military handbook.
It's time.
He called a spade a bloody shovel, but he was also an outstandingly successful commander.
And helps deliver the Allies' victory in the First World War. France, 1918. 4 years of war produced the greatest concentration of firepower the world has ever seen. A battlefront of hellish trenches 700 kilometres long. Millions of soldiers hurl themselves at their enemy's guns in dawn attacks. The scale and speed of the killing is the worst in history, all for gains of a few kilometres at best. Until, following a radical plan, an army of 4,500 Australians goes forward from their trenches at night. They're about to launch a surprise attack on the town of Villers-Bretonneux, held by battle-hardened Germans. Heavily outnumbered, the Australians will begin the fight without the support of the great guns that have dominated the war so far.
One of the clever things in this case was the lack of an artillery barrage before the attack. A barrage that was so expected that if you skipped it, things would be a surprise. And a night attack, too. Armies generally patrolled at night and attacked at first light.
Gather round.
It's a plan that many consider insane. If it succeeds, it could change the course of the war. And it's all the brainchild of Melbourne solicitor, now Brigadier General Pompey Elliott. Brilliant, appalled by the cost of trench warfare, determined to find another way to fight and win.
This village is the key to the Allied supply line.
He was controversial, compelling, forthright. He called a spade a bloody shovel, but he was also an outstandingly successful commander.
The war is going badly for the Allies. The Germans have only just taken the town of Villers-Bretonneux. If they hold it, they will be a decisive step closer to taking Paris and winning the war. Pompey knows the Germans must be pushed back now. His plan, Anzacs will move in at night, quietly encircle the heavily defended town and take the Germans by surprise, all in darkness and without artillery, just the weapons the Australians can carry. But only hours before Pompey plans to attack, he's still waiting for final permission. Some senior British officers have grave doubts about his tactics. Meanwhile, the diggers wait, nervous, vulnerable. At the last possible moment, Pompey gets the call he's been desperate for.
Right, man. This is it.
Now the Australians will attack in great numbers and from outside their trenches.
We've got this, man.
Section Commander Sergeant Walter Downing is an 8-month veteran of the trenches.
Men muttered, "It's Anzac Day," smiling to each other, enlivened by the omen. The die was now cast. It seemed there was nothing to do but go straight forward and die hard.
On the eve of Anzac Day 1918,
it's time.
Pompey Elliott's troops begin the battle that could change the course of the war. Sergeant Downing and his men are among the first Australians to storm Villers-Bretonneux and its formidable German defences. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the Anzacs are relentless.
They were full of running. They would have been very hard to stop.
In the initial charge, 1 in 3 Australians falls. They fight on through the night. The Australians kill, wound or capture more than 10,000 Germans. By dawn, the Australians have broken their enemy. Pompey Elliott's audacious plan has come off. Pompey's attack is one of the boldest manoeuvres of the war. It's key to transforming the way the Allies fight from now on.
I think every Australian should know the name Pompey Elliott. To go from being a solicitor to actually a commander of one of the most brilliant victories at Villers-Bretonneux is just a story that every Australian's chest should swell with pride.
The Australian victory marks the beginning of the end of the war. Pompey and his troops continue their surprise attacks. In 6 months, Germany will surrender. The French never forget the 1,200 Anzacs who died liberating their town, or the Australians at home whose donations help rebuild it. To this day, a special bond remains.
Now, of course, it's considered a little bit of Australia in France, and every Villers-Bretonneux child is an honorary Australian.
The Australian flag still flies proudly over Villers-Bretonneux. Since 1918, the main street is called Rue de Melbourne. Visitors from Australia are welcomed with open arms. And every day, local school children are reminded of what the diggers did.
Those guys had a tenacity, and a willingness to sacrifice for what they believed in. And that is the very essence, I think, of what the Anzac spirit is.
With its allies, Australia wins the war, but pays a shocking price. Out of a population of just 5 million, 400,000 fight. 1 in 7 will never come home. 150,000 return broken in body or mind. Despite the terrible losses, Australia emerges from the war with confidence, pride, and somehow optimism. We dream of a modern, connected country and hope for prosperity and peace.